Egert talks to a seismologist about the possibility of the same kind of quake happening in the Pacific Northwest. And at this hour, Cairo 7 Morning News anchor Chris Egert is on his way to Japan. It is part of our commitment to keep you on top of the earthquake and tsunami devastation. Look for his reports right here on Cairo 7. There are 2 flights set to leave tomorrow morning.
And right now, Cairo 7 Morning News anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa are on their way to Japan. They'll land at 2 a.m. our time. Look for their reports right here on Cairo 7.
It's just one part of our commitment to keeping you on top of the earthquake and tsunami devastation. We've put up a slideshow of the stunning images on our website, CairoTV.com, and ways that you can donate to the relief efforts.
Tech International Airport, I'm David Quinlan, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, David. And we're in contact this morning with Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert and his photographer Tom Matsuzawa. They left Seattle yesterday on their way to Japan and landed at Narita Airport in Tokyo just a little after 1 o'clock this morning. They were able to join up with a host family, and just after 5 this morning, they experienced an aftershock. Now, our contact with Chris has been limited overnight, but we do have Chris on the phone right now. Chris, I'm so glad you and Tom landed safely. And how powerful was that aftershock you experienced?
Well, Michelle, I think in the big grand scheme of things, that aftershock would be considered fairly minimal, but it was quite frightening nonetheless. You were here, as you mentioned, with a Seattle man. Family lives over here. He lives split time between the Seattle area and here in Tokyo, and we were watching local TV, and all of a sudden an alert warning came across on the local TV, and the family basically took cover, something that folks here in Tokyo are somewhat accustomed to, but it certainly doesn't make it any less scary for them. Scary for us, quite frankly. We're in a condo building, 12th floor, and the entire building was swaying. Everyone got underneath the kitchen table. Maybe after about a minute or so, the swaying had stopped, and everyone got back out and started watching the local TV again. I just glued to the coverage there as people look at the destruction in Sendai and the area north of Tokyo here. At the airport, it was very, very grueling, I'd say, for so many travelers, people who were here in the Tokyo area trying to leave the country, and the airport was basically at a standstill. We shot some video of people standing in line, and they were just lined up, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them lined up around the different corners of the airport. So people were basically trying to get out. Now, the flights have resumed out of Tokyo, at least in some way, shape, or form, but it's certainly very grueling for anyone trying to get in or out of Tokyo right now. Folks just trying to get any sort of grasp on the situation. Took a picture of some folks who were just in the airport, who were watching giant TV monitors. Many of them accustomed to going onto their laptops, but a lot of communication has been disrupted. So some of the information sources for folks just weren't readily available, although I can say here in Tokyo, that appears to be coming back. We also encountered some rescue organizations that were in the airport in Tokyo, and they were trying to head north towards Sendai. But quite frankly, it was almost impossible at that point to get out of the airport. We were lucky because we were traveling with someone who's local and knows sort of the ins and outs of it. We took local trains to get what was normally about an hour-long ride. It took us about 3 hours to get to the city center here in Tokyo. So Tokyo itself, really for the most part, folks are doing okay. There are some signs that something major has happened here, but basically nothing like what's happened in the northern part of the country. Now, it's midnight here, so we're planning on resting a little bit, and then first thing in the morning, we're going to be getting up and connecting with some of the Western Washington interests here. Business community, business trade is rich between Japan and Washington, and we've got a number of people that we're going to be in the process of contacting and hearing their stories over this ordeal. But so it's midnight here. People are braced for more aftershocks, and Michelle, we'll just kind of see how things play out.
So, Chris, I'm very surprised we're able to hear you so clearly and the phones are okay. Was that a little difficult? How is your cell phone? Have you been able to reach back home to your family, and is Tom as well? Is that stuff up and running? And you mentioned the trains are running as well.
cell phones, they're a little spotty. I'm on a landline here at the house we're staying at, so that's the reason I was able to get through. Having no problem sending text messages or emails, so that's pretty much the primary form of communication right now. And a lot of the train service is just starting to get back. I mean, this city typically runs like clockwork, so for not to have that orderly sort of way about it, it was certainly a huge disruption for folks here in Tokyo over the last 24 hours.
Okay, Chris Egert in Tokyo, Japan for us this morning with Tom Matsuzawa. Get some sleep, and we'll look forward to your reports over the weekend. Thank you, Chris. The tsunami advisory for our state is over this morning, and Cairo 7 tracked how the quake sent potentially dangerous
to talk to them about their travel difficulties, about what they saw, about the earthquake, about the damage. So again, we hope to have that for you here within the next 30 minutes or so. Live at SeaTac International Airport, I'm David Quinlan, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you for that, David. And we're in contact this morning with Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert and his photographer Tom Matsuzawa. They left Seattle yesterday on their way to Japan. They landed at Narita Airport in Tokyo just a little after 1 o'clock this morning. They were able to join up with a host family, and just after 5 o'clock this morning, they did experience an aftershock. Our contact with them is limited, but we do have some video and pictures they sent us this morning. Chris captured this video on his phone at the airport. He's following behind our photographer, Tom. You can see the number of people waiting with luggage in tow, waiting for flights out. Chris told us that people are surprisingly in good spirits despite the devastation that's hit the country. And here are a few more photos Chris sent us. Getting a hold of Chris for a phone call has proved difficult this morning, but we were able to talk to him last half hour by landline. Again, you can see people exhausted from the destruction, stranded, living out of the airport really right now. Many are glued to the TV watching the latest updates on Japanese television, and aid agencies have arrived to help and provide relief to those affected by the earthquake. Chris also sent us an email saying service for train and bus routes are very limited, and a typical 1-hour trip to Tokyo is expected to take 3 hours. We will continue to stay in touch with Chris and Tom throughout their entire trip. Stay with Cairo 7 to follow their latest updates. Other local families. Yeah, I think the flight alone is 10 hours. Thank you, David. We're in contact also this morning with Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa. They left Seattle yesterday on their way to Japan. They landed at Narita Airport in Tokyo just a little after 1 o'clock this morning. They joined up with a host family, and just after 5 o'clock this morning, they experienced an aftershock. Our contact with them is limited, but we do have some video and pictures they were able to send us out this morning. Chris captured this video with his phone at the airport. He's following behind our photographer, Tom. You can see the number of people waiting with luggage in tow, waiting for flights out. Chris told us that people are surprisingly in good spirits despite the devastation that's hit the country. Here are a few more photos Chris sent us. Getting a hold of Chris for a phone call has proved difficult this morning. But again, you can see people exhausted from the destruction, stranded, seemingly living out of the airport there. Many are glued to the TV watching the latest updates on Japanese television. And aid agencies have arrived to help out and provide relief to those affected by the earthquake. Chris also sent us an email saying service for train and bus routes are very limited, and a typical 1-hour trip to Tokyo is expected to take 3 hours. We will continue to stay in touch with Chris and Tom throughout their trip. Stay with Cairo 7 to follow their latest updates. The tsunami advisory for our state is over this
to jam phone lines, slowing down the process. Now, Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa are in Japan tonight, connecting with local families and people who went through the quake and are now dealing with the aftermath. Chris joins us right now on the phone from Tokyo with the story of one Seattle business leader who lived through the shaking and tonight is trying to get back home. Good to know you are safe and sound as well, Chris.
Thanks, Monique, but I can definitely attest to the fact that there are a lot of communication problems. In fact, we had a live signal established for just a few moments using internet lines, but that has gone black here over the last couple minutes, so that's why we're on the phone. We're going to try and reconnect that in a minute. Now to the story of Phyllis Campbell. She's J.P. Morgan Chase's chair of the Pacific Northwest, and here with a group of Japanese-American business leaders. They were getting ready to go inside Tokyo's ANA Hotel
when the earth started shaking. Here's what she told us about that.
We were sitting in the bus, parked in the parking lot, and the bus started to rock violently back and forth. And we all, since I've been in earthquakes before, I said to my colleagues, this is a major earthquake. So immediately I looked up at the tall office buildings, and I saw a crane that was just moving almost 45 degrees back and forth like this. And I literally thought the buildings were going to come down, but I was more worried that my colleagues were worried the bus might even tip over. It was rocking so much.
Now, Campbell and her group turned out to be okay and then eventually went on to their meeting, and now they're just in the process of trying to get out of Tokyo. Now, we can tell you firsthand that transportation is somewhat limited. It is getting back to normal, but some video that we shot a little bit earlier today shows the streets are very empty, far more empty than they'd be on a regular basis. Now, yesterday, Phyllis Campbell and that group with J.P. Morgan Chase tried to get out to the airport. This is normally about an hour-long trip, and it took them 7 hours, and they basically had to turn around and come back. They gave themselves 9 hours today to try to get out of town, and they're hopeful that that's going to be able to happen. Now, we are in contact with Western Washington interests here in Tokyo and around Japan, and we're doing our best to connect with them, but again, it is difficult to communicate at this point, but we're going to make sure and keep everyone back in Seattle posted as we reach out to people here from Western Washington living in Japan. Until then, reporting live in Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Now, Chris, before you go, our viewers are looking at video right now that you shot shortly after arriving that shows it looks like you're holding onto walls and doorways there. It looks like you went through an aftershock. Is that correct?
Yes, that was last night shortly after we got here, and we grabbed the iPhone and shot some video of it. But, yeah, we experienced a small aftershock shortly after we got here, and I'd say there's probably been 3 or 4 at least since that particular moment. So it's been something that's just become normal here. I know it's somewhat normal for people living in Tokyo and in Japan to have to deal with earthquakes, but we've definitely been going through several aftershocks. In fact, the host family that we're staying with from Seattle here, who are living in Japan, the little girls here who are on the couch have their helmets on, and that's how much a part of life it is here, living with earthquakes. Of course, nothing here in Tokyo, the situation pales to what it is in the northern part of the country in Sendai. Obviously a much, much, much different situation there. Tokyo, bumped and bruised a little bit, but otherwise doing okay. Okay,
Chris, thanks so much for that report. We'll hear from you again at 6:30. And you can find much more coverage of the disaster in Japan on our website, KairoTV.com. We've put up a slideshow of the stunning images on our website and ways you can donate to the relief effort. Now, still ahead, an electrical
dedicated, straightforward Seattle news coverage. Cairo 7 Eyewitness News starts right now.
Strong aftershocks continue after a record 8.9 earthquake slammed Japan, unleashing a monster tsunami. Hundreds are dead, thousands missing. Here at home, many local families are anxious for news while others embrace the return of their loved ones.
We have in-depth coverage tracking the latest developments in Japan and talking with anxious families waiting on news from their loved ones. We begin with Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert, who traveled to Japan with photographer Tom Matsuzawa. They just spoke with a chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase who was on a week-long trip in Japan when the earthquake hit. Chris?
Monique, we spoke to Phyllis Campbell. It's a name that many of you in the Seattle area are probably familiar with. She's J.P. Morgan Chase's chair of the Pacific Northwest, and here with a group of Japanese Americans. And they were on their way into a meeting inside a hotel when all of a sudden the earth started shaking. They were in a tour bus, and the bus was going back and forth. And in fact, they thought the bus was going to tip over. They all got out of the bus, filed outside, and looked around and said that they could look up off into the Tokyo sky and see cranes swaying back and forth and buildings moving. It was quite a scary experience for that Seattle woman, but she says that folks back in Seattle can definitely learn a lesson from what happened here in Japan.
It speaks to the story of Pacific Northwest residents about making sure that we have our infrastructure that's earthquake ready and to make sure that people are prepared. That's the other thing. I think the Tokyo residents were amazingly calm. As I said, this meeting went on, which was incredible in and of itself, and we met for an hour, and there were aftershocks rocking the room, but people were very calm, and I think that the lesson is people tend to know when there's a major problem, and I think most folks are pretty well prepared, and they understand what to do in the event of a disaster.
Now, Campbell says when she gets back to the Seattle area, she definitely wants to spearhead a humanitarian effort to try and help the people, especially in the northern areas of Japan, Sendai, where we have been talking about the nuclear threat and the massive destruction from the tsunami. Now, here in the city of Tokyo, where we've been at now for about 24 hours, we have been experiencing a series of aftershocks. But for the most part, transportation is getting back to normal here in Tokyo. But just to show you what it's like for an average Japanese family to go through these aftershocks, this is our host family, and these are a couple of girls that live here in this condominium, and you can see they've got their helmets on, and that's part of life here, definitely part of life here in Tokyo. Another thing that folks here in Tokyo and all around Japan have been concentrating on is they've been glued to the television set. As you can see, watching the television 24/7 as the images from Sendai and the northern areas continue to pour in, and information continues to pour in. Now, we have been in the process over the last several hours. Again, we've been only on the ground now in Tokyo for about 24 hours to get in contact with Boeing, with Microsoft, with JP Morgan Chase, you just heard from, and other Washington business interests here in Japan. And we're going to continue to talk to them over the course of the next several days. Reporting live in Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Forward to that. Thank you very much, Chris. And stay with Cairo 7 for continued live coverage from Tokyo with morning anchor Chris Egert. We'll check back with him in a few minutes, and also again tonight on 11 at 11. Well, new major aftershocks are striking Japan, and there are big worries about meltdowns at the country's nuclear reactors. Cairo 7 Eyewitness News reporter Graham John and changes. Now tonight, Tokyo is bracing for an unusual planned power outage. This comes because the city's electricity is compromised by those problems with the damaged nuclear plants. Cairo 7 Morning News anchor Chris Egert is in Tokyo and spoke with a Seattle business leader who is trying to get out of Japan amid all the chaos.
We were sitting in the bus parked in the parking lot, and the bus started to rock violently back and forth.
JP Morgan Chase's Phyllis Campbell and other Japanese-American business leaders survived the quake and are now trying to get out. Streets are quiet for Tokyo, normally a transportation marvel, now just coming back to life. But residents of the city don't know what to expect, with rolling power outages to begin soon. That makes getting to the airport that much more of a challenge for the Seattle woman and the people she's traveling with.
We left 7 hours early to get to Narita, which is normally, as you know, a 1 hour trip by car or bus or shuttle, and 6 hours later we were only a third of the way to the airport because all the major highways were being closed for inspection.
Campbell is amazed that Tokyo has done as well as it did in the quake, all things considered, but urges people in Western Washington who see the destruction in Japan to plan ahead.
Making sure that we have our infrastructure that's earthquake ready and to make sure that people are prepared.
Campbell hopes to get home to Seattle and hit the ground running, organizing aid efforts for earthquake and tsunami ravaged Japan. In Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
And stay with Cairo 7 for continued coverage from Tokyo, Japan. Chris will continue to check back in with us as the situation over there develops. Well, the nuclear threat spawned news. And Cairo 7 Eyewitness News morning anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa are in Tokyo tonight. Chris joins us now by phone. You're actually 16 hours ahead, Chris, well into Monday. What are you seeing today in Tokyo?
Yeah, Monique, it's 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, and this was to be the first day back to work for a lot of folks here in Tokyo, first day back to work since the earthquake hit Japan. But a lot of the workers are being told that they should stay home. And the reason is that there's so much uncertainty with the power grid. Graham was just talking about that. Well, those facilities are the ones that power Tokyo and power a lot of the country. So there's the possibility of rolling blackouts. there's much that people don't know about how the city is going to be affected. Now, there was one scheduled blackout earlier this morning. That has been canceled, but everyone here is operating under the assumption that more of these rolling blackouts are definitely likely. And as you alluded to a short time ago, there is this fear hanging over everyone's head that there could be another earthquake in coming days. Japanese officials saying that there's a 70% chance of a strong earthquake, 7.0 or above. So that's, again, contributing as to why a lot of the local workers are being told that they should just stay home today on this Monday. Now, 9 o'clock here, our time, we're in the process of trying to get together with some folks with the Boeing company here to talk to them about how production of 787 parts, how production may be affected because of these blackouts, because of the so many questions that there are about the infrastructure and transportation. But our meeting that we initially had scheduled with them has been pushed back because a lot of folks are just unable to get to work right now because many of the trains are late. And this city that typically runs like clockwork is running like a very slow clock right now. Not necessarily broken, but definitely slower. So we will stay here. We are in the process of trying to send back some video as well to give you guys back in Seattle a look at what the streets look like here. Typically very busy right now. We're in the process of that. We're going to send that back in a little bit. Then we're going to be hopping in a cab with a car and a translator and headed up to talk to the folks with Boeing. Monique?
We look forward to that, Chris. We should also mention we were just watching video a little bit ago of people who seem to be lining up long lines for water. But in Tokyo, is that the situation? That looked to be a smaller, more remote town.
Interesting that you bring that up, Monique. Here in Tokyo, there's definitely not an immediate sort of shortage of food, but anecdotally, we walked down to a convenience store to get a Coke yesterday. This was yesterday, about 24 hours ago. And at that point, at 7-Eleven, which here they carry all sorts of different food items. They carry sushi and a lot more than what the American 7-Elevens carry. But a lot of the food stock at this convenience store in the neighborhood that we were at were empty. So people definitely, even here in the city of Tokyo, they just don't know what's going to happen here with these power outages. They just don't know. So they are stocking up even here in the city. Definitely not running out, though, but people are stocking up.
Okay, we look forward to checking back in with you, Chris. Thank you very much. Cairo 7 Eyewitness News morning anchor Chris Egert reporting live from Tokyo. Now, here in the Northwest, officials are now close. Relief agencies and the U.S. military are hauling supplies to that region as quickly as they can. Cairo 7 Eyewitness News morning anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa are in Tokyo right now. And from what you're about to see, it's pretty quiet for a Monday morning there.
It's Monday morning in Tokyo and the first time back to work since the earthquake hit. But as you can see, as we take a look at the streets here outside of our hotel near downtown Tokyo, there is not a lot of activity out there. Some workers are being told to stay home because of the uncertainty with the power grid. One scheduled blackout this morning has already been canceled, but others are more likely. And then there's the fear of another earthquake in coming days. Japanese officials said yesterday there's a 70% chance of a strong quake, 7.0 or above. We're in the process right now of meeting up with Boeing officials here in Tokyo to talk about how that company has been affected by the earthquake. 30% of the 787 Dreamliner is made here in Japan. We'll be finding out if these rolling power outages and other infrastructure issues may affect Boeing production on the 787 Dreamliner. We're headed that direction right now. We'll have an update coming up for you a little bit later today. Till then, in downtown Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Japanese officials now say the level of radiation at a crippled nuclear power plant has exceeded the legal limit, and we're learning of nearly 200 people already exposed to radiation. The Regulatory Commission predicted there have been no elevated readings. Right now, Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa are in Tokyo. It's already Monday morning there. It is much more quiet than normal, and Chris joins us on the phone as he heads toward Boeing's Japan office. Chris?
Monique, 10:30 in the morning here, and just to let you know how the logistics of Tokyo have been working against us.
so far today. We remain in our hotel lobby as we wait for the person who is going to help transport us to the Boeing offices here in Tokyo. The transportation grid is greatly slowed down. Many folks, even because of that, being told not to go to work today. So we are getting ready in the process to get over and talk to the Boeing folks, much to learn from them. Initially, a couple days ago, they told the website flight bloggers that the 787 program did not have any disruptions. But at that point, that was a couple of days ago, and nobody was factoring in these power problems, these infrastructure issues, the transportation problems that are now facing folks all over the country of Japan, not just in the northern part where the tsunami just ravaged the countryside. I mean, this is something that in one way, shape, or form is being felt around the entire area. So we are on our way to try and talk to them. We want to update people in Western Washington on the Boeing interest here because economically it doesn't get any bigger than that or more important than the 787 program back in Washington State. So we're on our way over there. Eventually, we'll see how we go. Just felt a small aftershock in our hotel. Most folks taking it in stride. We did shoot a little bit of video of that with iPhone. In the process of also trying to send that back to you guys, but data transmission is also greatly disrupted. Monique?
Great work out there. Thank you very much. Chris Egert reporting live from Tokyo. And stay with Cairo 7 for continued coverage from Tokyo. We'll check back in with Chris tonight on 11 at 11 after he visits that Boeing office where 30% of the Dreamliner is made. Today, places of worship across Western Washington are doing that work, but again, no elevated readings at this point. Now tonight, Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert connected with Boeing officials in Japan to find out what sort of impact the earthquake has had on facilities there. But because of communication disruptions, he was not able to send the full report. But he sent this brief update from Boeing on his iPhone.
We've just had a chance finally to speak with Boeing representatives here in Tokyo. It's been a very disrupted workday because of the threat of aftershocks and because of the transportation issues. Know that the 30 Western Washington workers for Boeing here in Japan are okay. And as it stands now, the production on the 767, the 777, and the 787 is okay. However, with the threat of earthquakes, all bets are off. We will keep you posted. In Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Now, 16% of the 767 is made in Japan, 21% of the 777, and 35% of the 787. So what happens in Japan is key to what happens back here in Washington. Now, stay with Cairo 7 for continued coverage from Tokyo. Chris is going to try to connect with Federal Way-based World Vision in the next few hours, and we're planning to check in with him for a live report during our morning news. Well, local sailors on board the USS Blue It is 16 hours ahead in Japan, making it about 3:15 in the afternoon right now. Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert is at CNN in Tokyo and joins us live from outside their studio right now. Chris, it's been pretty quiet out there today, hasn't it?
Monique, unusually quiet for a very bustling city. In fact, it's taken a lot of the locals that we've been traveling with a little bit off guard. We were out in front of one of the main train stations here in Tokyo about noontime, which was right outside of the Boeing central headquarters here in Japan. I'll get to that in a minute. But we were out in front of this train station at lunchtime, and there were just not a lot of people out and about. And the reason for that is a lot of the folks are being urged to just go ahead and stay at home today because there are so many questions about transportation. There were so many questions about the electrical grid here. Now, we know that the main problems with those power plants have been to the north of Tokyo. That said, a lot of those supply the power here to the city of Tokyo. So there's been a lot of questions about how the power is going to be affected here. Now, in the central city core where we're at right now, they have had power throughout the day because this is an essential part to running the city. But in outlying areas, folks have not had a lot of power, and folks have also had a hard time getting in and out of the city. Train ride that typically takes a short time can take up to an hour and a half. Now, the reason that we were in this particular area of the city, which Boeing headquarters is probably a couple miles away from where we're at here at the CNN Bureau, was to touch base with Boeing, talk to them about their operations here. They've got about 30 people from Western Washington that are here in Japan, and everyone is okay. Everyone's accounted for. There are 200 people total for the Boeing company that are working here in Japan. Now, they're doing work on several different airlines, different production lines. Monique, you ran through those a little bit earlier in the newscast. But Mitsubishi, one of the wing maker for the 787, had to stop production for a short time after the earthquake. That has resumed at this point. But the big question is the fear of aftershocks and where those aftershocks will be felt the strongest. And that is a huge, huge thing that is hanging over everyone's heads here in Tokyo and all of Japan. So the bottom line is everyone from Boeing is okay, and there are no production delays at the Japanese facilities so far. That changes, however, if there's another major aftershock like they're predicting, 7.0 perhaps. 70% chance of that happening, Monique.
You certainly want that last 30%. Thank you very much, Chris. Good to see you safe and sound and reporting from Tokyo for us. We'll check back in with you during our morning broadcast. Well, moving on right now, new tonight, the search is on.
And aftershocks continue to rattle Japan this morning.
KIRO 7's Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa, they're in Tokyo right now. They give us updates on the west of the Washington business interests there.
Chris joins us live now with what he learned after speaking extensively with Boeing workers in Japan. Chris?
Well, it was quite a journey just to get to Boeing's offices in the central part of Tokyo today. Aftershocks, transportation issues, communication problems, but we did finally get there to get an update. But once we got there, we were surprised to see that many of the workers didn't make it in. Japanese officials asked a lot of folks to just stay home. Other people had to stay home because their children didn't have class today. Boeing spokesperson Rob Henderson and other colleagues that did make it into the office today have all been glued to the TV looking for the latest information on reactor problems at power plants to the north.
People who can come to work have come to work. Those who can work from home are working from home. Obviously, the trains aren't running a normal service, so we can't get everybody in at the moment.
Like Mitsubishi, the 787 wing maker, had to evacuate their buildings, but work quickly started back up. Now, because the main manufacturing facilities are south of Tokyo in Nagoya, power disruptions have not been a problem, so the company says that no Dreamliner production delays have resulted. So for now, Boeing's 200 workers here in Japan, and about 30 of whom are from Western Washington, everyone's doing okay. But the cold, hard facts remain. Japanese officials say there is a 70% chance of another major earthquake, an aftershock that could be 7.0 or magnitude and above. And that has a lot of folks just holding their breath, hoping that it doesn't happen. But it is affecting daily life everywhere, even here in Tokyo, 2 or 3 hours from where the main devastation was. Convenience stores that we've been at have very little food. Grocery stores, people are stocking up on things like rice, even toilet paper. Everyone is very concerned about what is going to happen next here in Tokyo. Reporting live, Chris Egert, KIRO 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Chris. We'll be checking in with him a little bit later on in this newscast as well. Local sailors on board the USS Blue Ridge are heading back to Japan this morning to help in relief efforts.
Police chief of Miyagi says he expects it to rise to more than 10,000 in just that province alone. And aftershocks continue to shake Japan this morning.
KIRO 7's Chris Egert and news photographer Tom Matsuzawa are in Tokyo getting updates on Washington companies and workers there. Chris?
They've been all over Tokyo the past few days and join us live after getting an update from Boeing today. Chris?
Well, Julie, we've been checking in with Boeing, and we're told that their 200 workers based in Japan are all doing okay. 30 of those individuals are from Western Washington. But at this hour, everyone's accounted for, and in fact, everyone's at work. But there's an eerie sort of feeling that's been going on here in Tokyo all day, with the uncertainty of the power plants to the north and the strong possibility of another major quake. The streets near Boeing's central Tokyo headquarters, when we visited earlier in the afternoon today, around lunchtime, a typically very busy part of the day, the streets were empty.
I mean, who can say these are earthquakes that are happening? Who's to know where the next one is going to be? And we've got aftershocks at the moment, which may affect, obviously. Who can say?
Now, 16% of the 767 is made in Japan, 21% of the 777, and 35% of the 787. So what happens here is key to what happens back in Washington. Now, Boeing and the key suppliers, their facilities are south of Tokyo. They're in an area called Nagoya, where the earthquake didn't do as much damage, but more importantly, it is not having the impact as far as the electrical infrastructure. The main problems with those plants that you've been hearing about and the radiological issues, that is north of Tokyo. Where these Boeing facilities are, that is south of Tokyo. But as the situation in the north continues to change moment by moment, there is just so much uncertainty, not only for the Boeing workers, but of everyone here in Tokyo. It is a very strange feeling here in the city of Tokyo. No one working, a lot of children not going to school, grocery stores not having food on the shelves. And keep in mind, Tokyo went through this earthquake, but this is by no stretch of the imagination where the worst damage is. That's considerably farther north than here. But the people of Japan are all just waiting to see what's going to happen next. In Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Thanks, Chris. Sorry for the scratchy audio there, but amazing that he actually has a cell signal to even talk to us live this morning. We're getting We're checking this morning on businesses in Japan that have strong ties to Western Washington.
We've been hearing all morning from a morning co-anchor, Chris Egert, who is in Tokyo. He visited Boeing's office today and at 6 a.m. told us the 200 workers there are keeping on schedule. Now he joins us again to describe what he's experiencing in what is usually one of the world's busiest cities.
Jeff and Julie, it's 10:45 right now in Tokyo, and it has been a very, very interesting day, to say the least. We've experienced so many aftershocks that by the end of the day today, we pretty much stopped noticing them. It's almost something that's become a custom for folks. Daily out and about, as people are going around, they're noticing things like convenience stores don't have a lot of food on the shelves. 7-Eleven stores in particular here in Tokyo, much different than the 7-Eleven stores in Seattle and back in the United States. They have all sorts of food items there, including sushi and fresh food items. All of that food is gone off of the store shelves. People are nervous about what may happen if there's another big earthquake. People are stocking up. They really, quite frankly, don't know what to do. At the grocery stores, folks are stocking up on things like toilet paper, things like rice. A lot of the workers won't report to work again tomorrow. Many of the children, school children, will not be going to class. So everyone here in Japan is basically holding their collective breath, just waiting for something to happen. Officials say there's a very strong chance, a 70% chance, that there will be another major earthquake. Of course, no one wants that to happen. Neither Tom nor I want that to happen either. We'll keep you posted throughout our journey here in Japan. Jeff, Julie, back to you.
Dramatic rescues are taking place in several of the hardest hit places in Japan.
Chief Executive of the Commercial Airline Unit, Jim Albaugh, says today that the aircraft production could be hit in several weeks if it suffers disruption in parts from key Japanese suppliers in the wake of last week's earthquake and tsunami. Cairo 7 Morning News anchor Chris Egert connected with Boeing officials in Japan to find out what sort of impact the earthquake has had on facilities so far.
The streets outside Boeing's offices in central Tokyo tell the story of how the earthquake is affecting daily life here. On a normal Monday at noon, this area would be packed with people. But with many workers being told to stay home due to power and transportation issues, the workforce is greatly affected.
I'm going home. Okay. I just came to pick up my computer so I can work from home.
Many workers at the Boeing office are going home early for the day. Others, like spokesperson Rob Henderson, are glued to the TV looking for the latest information.
People who can come to work have come to work. Those who can work from home are working from home. Obviously, the trains aren't running a normal service, so we can't get everybody in at the moment.
It has been an unbelievable 4 days for Henderson and others here.
It was quite frightening. The building shook quite strongly. Everybody remained as calm as they could.
At the main manufacturing facility south of Tokyo in Nagoya, work on production lines was stopped right after the quake for a short time. Mitsubishi, the 787 wing maker, had to evacuate their buildings, but work quickly started back up. 16% of the 767 is made in Japan, 21% of the 777, and 35% of the 787. So what happens here is key to what happens back in Washington. For now, Boeing's 200 workers in Japan, 30 of whom are from Western Washington, are keeping on schedule.
Who can say these are earthquakes that are happening? Who's to know where the next one is going to be? And we've got aftershocks at the moment, which may affect, obviously. Who can say?
No delays on major Boeing programs so far, but with a 70% chance of a major aftershock in coming days, all bets are off. In Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Amateur video shot by residents of coastal towns captured the destructive force and deadly ferocity of the tsunami that hit Japan on Friday. Footage obtained by broadcaster NHK shows cars floating in the water, slamming into each other and into whatever was in the way. Check this out. A bus perched on top of a building in one of the towns washed out by a tsunami. The violent wave somehow pushed this bus onto the top of this elementary school. Local sailors on the USS Blue Ridge are headed back to Japan to help in the relief efforts there. We spoke on the phone with seaman Melissa.
Washington. And right now, help is rushing to Japan from Western Washington. Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert is live now in Tokyo. And Chris, we are learning that emergency responders from the Seattle area are headed there.
Yeah, Monique, they're joining a number of other people who are headed into Japan to try and help. But, boy, the big question is when they get here, where do they go? It's so dangerous to travel to the north of the city here at Tokyo to Sendai and the areas where we're having all these issues with the nuclear reactors. Now, we had our Cairo 7 cameras at SeaTac Airport earlier today before these two women from Western Washington took off. Kelly Melton is a firefighter from Bellevue, and Tamara Alvarez is a nurse from Gig Harbor. They signed up with a group called Impact Northwest to go to help in disaster areas. Both have helped in Haiti, and they say they enjoy the difficult situations.
We know that there's an earthquake. We know that there's tsunami, mass casualty. Now there's a nuclear threat, and I would equate it to what we deal with firefighting every day. You only get a little bit of information before you arrive on scene, and it's once you get there that you're truly able to assess the full picture.
And that's not a bad analysis by those ladies, but the problem is the people here who are in charge of figuring out what's going on don't exactly know. We've been watching these news conferences from the Sendai area, the Japanese power officials, the way they're wording their responses, very uncertain. So there is a lot of uncertainty here, exactly what will happen. So we wish Kelly and Tamara the very best as they head north. And just for them logistically getting to Sendai from Japan or from Tokyo here could be very difficult. Train service is greatly disrupted today. A lot of the transportation is interrupted. It's Tuesday morning here in Tokyo. Some people are getting back to work, but for the most part, it is again very quiet here, eerily quiet. In Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Chris. And right now, Cairo 7 reporter Richard Thompson is in the air over the Pacific on his way to join Chris in reporting from Japan to bring home the story of the devastation there, with a special eye to the Northwest connection that we find to this tragedy.
Scientists at the University of Washington are monitoring the air here in the Northwest for any signs of radioactive debris from Japan. Cairo 7's Chris Lagueros has been talking with them, and he is live on the UW campus tonight. Chris.
Talking with professors here at the Seattle campus of the UW in Bothell and with people at the State Department of Health, and finding out all of them agree no radiation yet, no trace of it.
Well, it was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, but tonight a group of students has been forced to go back home just days after their planned 2-year trip to Japan was cut short because of last week's earthquake and tsunami. Cairo 7's Chris Egert is live in Tokyo with their story. Chris.
Well, Angela, keep in mind that this is Tokyo, and in other times a big, vibrant city with thousands and thousands of tourists here on any given moment. So now imagine all those people who are here supposed to be having a good time and then caught in the aftermath of the earthquake. Although you don't see rubble on the streets of Tokyo, you do see a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty was certainly felt by a group of young students that we met from Canada in our hotel lobby. They're from Richmond Hill, which is north of Toronto, the Holy Trinity School. This group of young people had been planning their trip to Japan for 2 years, and they only ended up being able to be on the ground for 3 days before parents and everyone concerned back in Canada, back home, decided it was in their best interest to turn around and come back.
It's been real hard for parents. It's been hard on the parents, it's been hard on the kids, hard on the administration, the school administration as well.
So I assume everyone's quite disappointed things have to end quickly.
Exceptionally disappointed.
Yeah, so obviously those tourists from Canada very upset that they had to go back home. We're told that the American Embassy and a lot of the embassies here in Tokyo are busy with people going there, trying to get information and trying to find out the best way for them to leave. Now, just a short time ago here in Tokyo, we heard an announcement go out. Unfortunately, it's not going on right now. I was hoping I could hold the microphone out for you to listen to. But an announcement just went out that rolling power outages, that they are going to begin soon. Is that what they are not going to begin soon? Okay, so there were some questions about whether or not we were going to have these rolling power outages right here as it is right now. That has been postponed. But it's that sort of uncertainty on a day-to-day basis right now while it's really not a good idea for any tourists or anyone to be here if they don't have to. Reporting live in Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Now, meanwhile, Chris, despite his very taxed throat and voice, is keeping a close eye on how the earthquake is impacting Boeing suppliers and production in Japan. Most workers, including many Boeing employees in Tokyo, were told to stay home today due to power and transportation issues. Many Boeing workers who did make it to work have been glued to the television looking for the latest information.
People who can come to work have come to work. Those who can work from home are working from home. Obviously, the trains aren't running a normal service, so we can't get everybody in at the moment.
At the main manufacturing facility south of Tokyo in Nagoya, work on production lines was stopped right after the quake for a short time. At this point, work is still on schedule, but experts still say there is a 70% chance of a major aftershock, which could bring production to a halt. Now, a warning tonight to watch out for online scammers looking to exploit the tragedy in Japan.
Reporting live at SeaTac Airport, Deborah Horn, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
People living in northern Japan have been dealing with food and water shortages since right after the quake. But tonight, a shortage of supplies is starting to show in Tokyo. Cairo 7 morning anchor Chris Egert is in Tokyo tonight. He's been there for 4 days now. Chris, what are you finding?
Well, Angela, we definitely want to be clear there are no food shortages here in Tokyo, and I know that's not what you said, but I want everyone back in Seattle to understand that. There's plenty of food here in Tokyo, but what you're seeing here is so much uncertainty that people really don't know what to do. If there's another big earthquake, if there are more problems with the power grid, people are very, very uncertain. So that's the reason that you're seeing folks going out and buying a lot of things at the grocery stores and convenience stores. Now, I shot some video just a short time ago at a convenience store that's kind of right around the corner here from where we're broadcasting live. It's a Tuesday morning here. It was right at the busy start of the workday for folks, and the shelves on the inside of that 7-Eleven store were bare. And also something for you to keep in mind, 7-Elevens here in Tokyo in Japan, much different than the ones that we're accustomed to in the United States. With all due respect to those in the United States, some of the food that they have here is probably considered a little bit more desirable. But none of that food is inside of this particular store that we're at. We're also told it's the same thing that's happening in a lot of the grocery stores. People are stocking up on things like rice, even toilet paper. People are running to get their cars gassed up. Again, all based on the uncertainty of this situation. Now, I will tell you that, again, today's Tuesday morning. Today compared to yesterday, we have seen a lot more workers and a lot more regular folks out on the streets, sort of trying to get back to their regular routine. But boy, oh boy, what's regular around here right now? Certainly not one thing. Reporting live in Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Chris. Now, the nuclear crisis Japan is dealing with brings up the question, could any radiation released from the Fukushima plant carry across the ocean and cause problems here in Washington?
Well, those rising radiation levels in Tokyo are creating even more anxiety for the people there. Cairo 7 morning news anchor Chris Egert and photographer Tom Matsuzawa have been on the ground now for 72 hours and are live in Tokyo with the local group's mission to get aid to earthquake and tsunami victims. Chris.
Yeah, Angela, it is quite the situation here on the streets of Tokyo. The radiation levels right now stand at about 22% higher than normal. Now, that is not enough to cause any health effects for human beings, but it definitely is something that people are concerned about. In fact, officials are telling people that they need to wear these masks right now when they're out and about because of the radiation particles. Now, just a couple of minutes ago, there was a warning siren that went off. We grabbed our iPhone and shot off over the balcony where we're at here. Here's what happened. Listen. That was an official getting on the air talking about the rolling power outages, which are happening all around us, although not exactly where we're at in southern Tokyo. Now, to the efforts of World Vision out of Federal Way. They, in the middle of all of this, are trying to coordinate crews to get to the northern part of the country. We stopped by their headquarters a little bit ago, not too far from where we're at, maybe about a 45-minute cab ride from where we're at, to see some of the workers there. There are several workers there right now, office workers, trying to coordinate the aid efforts. As you can imagine, logistics are a nightmare. 4 World Vision personnel are on the ground near Sendai, trying to figure out what gaps they can fill in the Japanese government response.
And one of the areas we've identified is psychosocial needs of children, and it's something we did after the earthquake in Haiti. And so we do that through what we call child-friendly spaces. And those are areas where kids can come and basically be mentored by a World Vision trained counselor, participate in art therapy. They can do informal education while their schools are closed if they've been damaged, and basically just give them a chance to have some stability and some normalcy in their life after living in chaos for a couple days.
That was Casey Calamusa from Seattle, here coordinating the communication efforts for World Vision. He wants people back home to know that the folks here are doing everything they can to help. World Vision convoys are carrying bottled water, diapers, powdered milk, and blankets on the way to Sendai and some of the areas north of there. So we wish them the very best of luck. And of course, if you want to help them in their efforts to help the Japanese people, you should go to their website where you can donate. So the bottom line here in Tokyo, folks are being asked to wear these masks as they continue to monitor the radiation levels, 22% higher where we're at than what they should be. Reporting live in Tokyo, Chris Egert, Cairo 7 Eyewitness News.
Cairo 7's Richard Thompson and photographer Jay Johnson are on their way to Japan to join Chris. They left SeaTac today and are traveling with volunteers from Impact Northwest who help in disaster areas. Reports from Chris and Richard will continue in the days to come on Cairo 7 and on CairoTV.com.
A locally based activist group returned from Japan to share some of the
and seaports across the country tonight. The Department of Homeland Security tells us it is checking travelers arriving from Japan just in case. This photo of a Homeland Security officer holding a radiation scanner at SeaTac Airport was taken by Cairo 7's Chris Egert as he returned from reporting in Japan this morning.
It's great to be back.
Carlin Hansen-Smith was on the same flight and underwent the same scrutiny.
Some people would it would make a little bit of noise when you went by, and they just pulled those people aside and did some additional screening and then let them go on their way.
SeaTac is among many other airports where officials are checking for any possible radiation contamination. Here at Taiwan's two major airports, sensitive devices are being installed.
I think it's a legitimate concern.
Hansen-Smith may know more about that than many travelers. Her husband is a nuclear engineer now working in Japan. But others we spoke with were concerned about possible invasiveness of radiation scanning.
I don't know how ethical that is. I don't know. But, also at the same time, there's that safety concern.
Hansen-Smith and their two kids weren't due to return to their Bremerton home until May. But because of the dangers in Japan, they came back early. Now, she worries about her husband.
Who knows what's going to be going on over there? Things are always changing. And so I would love him to come home as soon as he can.
Tonight, the Department of Homeland Security tells us so far no harmful radiation levels have been detected at our nation's airports or seaports.
Now, while we were at SeaTac Airport, it was not too hard to pick out who was a
best option to cool the dangerously hot reactors. We'll continue to track the wires and satellite feeds and be back with you very soon. Julie, Michelle.
Jeff, thank you. And my co-anchor Chris Egert is back in Western Washington this morning after returning from Japan. Look at that shot. Here's his daughter welcoming him home with that big hug at SeaTac Airport yesterday. Chris comes back to the anchor desk on Monday. Coming up in less than 30 minutes, a look at the radiation testing that he had to undergo right after landing at SeaTac Airport.
Medical Teams International of Seattle is sending as many supplies as it can to the Japanese people, but the agency tells us it cannot send any doctors over because Japan requires
stop a full-out nuclear meltdown. Julie.
Jeff, thank you. And my co-anchor Chris Egert is back here in Western Washington this morning after returning from Japan. Look at this picture. There's his daughter welcoming him home with a big hug at SeaTac Airport yesterday. Chris will be back on the anchor desk on Monday. Coming up in less than 30 minutes, a look at the radiation testing that he had to go through right after he landed at SeaTac Airport.
Medical Teams International of Seattle is sending as many supplies as it can to the Japanese people, but the agency tells us it cannot send any doctors over because